Let's discuss now about series circuit. So basically, if we have some resistors like R1, R2, R3, and they are connected like this, and then you connect with a battery, so we will have a current flowing through the circuit, and let's call this current as a total current I. So this current will be flowing into R1, and we can call it I1. And then let's think about current flowing in R2, and we call it I2, also here I3. And because we don't have any branch here, so basically the current is just flowing through a wire or resistor. Therefore, according to Kirchhoff law, the total current I has to be equal to I1, also equals to I2 and I3. So this is the basic rule in the series, right? So the total current has to be equal to I1, I2, and I3, and so on. Now, when we have this circuit, basically what we do is we can have a total resistance, or let me call it RS, R series. Okay. So how do we calculate this total resistance in series? Well, basically, we can add all of this resistance. So basically, the RS has to be R1 plus R2 plus R3. How do we get this relationship RS as R1 plus R2 plus R3? Well, let's suppose you measure the voltage difference here from this point to that point. So let's call it V1. So V1, basically the voltage difference of the resistor 1. And then we also measure the voltage difference of R2, let's call it V2. And lastly, we also measure the voltage difference at R3, so it's V3. Okay, now you know that V1 is just I1 times R1, also V2, I2 times R2, and V3, I3 times R3. And if you measure V1, V2, and V3, you will find that the total of V1, V2, and V3 is equal to the total voltage you have in your battery. So the total voltage here is V1 plus V2 plus V3. Okay, so this is the relationship of the voltage difference in series. Okay, now if you put in the value that the total voltage you have here, so basically if I now have another circuit that has the total voltage VT, and this is your total resistance, and the current here is I, right? The same current here we have. So total V is I times the total resistance equals to I1 times R1 plus V2 I2 times R2 plus V3 I3 times R3. Since the current are the same, so basically you will cancel out this current, all of them, and at the end you can see that we only have the total resistance equals to R1 plus R2 plus R3. So this is how we get this relationship. Basically, that's from the total voltage of the resistance. Okay, so again, keep in mind that in series the current are the same, but the total of voltage has to be the total of V1, V2 and V3, right? Now let me give you one example. So let's suppose we have R1 2 ohms, R2 3 ohms, R3 5 ohms, okay, and you connect to a battery 10 volt. Now the first part that you need to think about is the total resistance of this resistor. So basically you are finding the total resistance here, and as you can see before that the total resistance in series will be R1 plus R2 plus R3, right? So that's just 2 plus 3 plus 5, and it's 10 ohms. Okay, now this resistance is connected to a battery and the voltage is just 10 volts. Therefore the total current you will have is the voltage 10 volts divided by the total resistance 10 ohms. Therefore you get 1 amp. Okay, so this is the current that you have, 1 amp in your circuit. Okay, so again, the first step when you solve the electrical circuit is to find the total resistance of your circuit. Okay, and now let's imagine this resistance is connected to the same battery here, and then you can get your total current, right? Now this current is flowing through the R1, R2 and R3, and they are the same, right? So this is also 1 amp, 1 amp, 1 amp. Now if you measure the voltage difference at R1, let's call it V1, that will be 1 amps times this resistance 2 ohms. Okay, so you will get 2 volts. And now if you also measure the voltage difference at R2, let's call it V2, V2 will be 1 amp times this resistance 3, so you'll get 3 volts, right? 3 volts. And lastly, when you measure the voltage difference at R3, then the V3 will be this current 1 times the resistance you have 5, so that you get 5 volts. Now if you look at this V1, V2 and V3, you'll see that the total voltage, okay, so this is 2 and V2 is 3 volt and V3 is 5 volt. So the total voltage you have 2, 3 and 5, they are equal to 10. So basically that has to be the same as your total voltage. Okay.